What are some of my top predictions that you're going to see here in Los Angeles as a result of the recent wildfires? Stay tuned for this video. Hey guys, Scott Himelstein with the Scott Himelstein Group. So today I kind of wanted to give you some of kind of things that I expect to happen as a result of these wildfires. And we're going to go into detail on a bunch of things today. So before we get into all of that, someone actually posed a question to me and I actually had to look it up and verify it with FEMA to actually make sure it's correct. And that is, a lot of us, especially if you have friends and family, and everybody knows somebody affected by the wildfires in one form or another. Either they're evacuated or they actually lost a home, unfortunately, right? Somebody knows somebody. And so a lot of us have been asked, or you've seen these GoFundMe accounts set up to help family and friends. Because at the end of the day, before we get into our top predictions, people are really going to need cash more than they are donations. And the donations are great, don't get me wrong, but they're going to be things that people need. Like we just got one that they needed a toaster, right? And so most people aren't donating toasters right here. And so as a result of that, you're seeing these GoFundMe pages develop for these families, right? To kind of help them with the needs that they have financially. Well, here's the thing is that if you set up a GoFundMe, and let's just say you end up with $10,000 in that account, and it's specifically earmarked to help your family with financials as a result of these wildfires, it's probably going to disqualify you from getting help from FEMA. And that's because FEMA actually says it's by law, federal law, that you can't be paid twice for the same thing. So you can't be getting reimbursed for expenses by FEMA as well as GoFundMe. So this is something that if you want more details about, go to FEMA. They still recommend that you actually apply for assistance with them regardless, and then you can actually figure it out. But again, if you have a GoFundMe page right there, or you started one for a family, just kind of work through that. And maybe it may make more sense. Let's say, for example, you lost a car and you wanted $10,000 to kind of help reimburse expenses because you need a car for transportation in Los Angeles. Maybe it's earmarked for that. So maybe FEMA doesn't reimburse that family for the car. Instead, they just for the fire, something of that nature. But just kind of want to point it out because you're seeing a lot of GoFundMe pages being set up for everybody. All right, now that we talked about that, so I probably say something that's really popular, a question right now that a lot of our sellers reaching out to us that would be putting their home on the market over the course of the next few weeks, next few months. And, do I think prices are going to increase in the short term? Yes, I do. I think there's the big reason for that is I think because you're having inventory taken away because people are taking that inventory off the market. Maybe it's they want to be able to allow family and friends to have a place to stay. During these crazy times, maybe they're getting rent, maybe they're not getting rent, but some of these homes are being taken off the market, right? So if you had, let's just say, for example, 10,000 homes and 500 of them are being taken off the market, right? It's going to impact at the end of the day. It's just law of supply and demand of how it's going to affect home buyers. But I think there's a couple of things you have to keep in mind that depending on the area, it's going to be affected differently, right? Because I had someone in Las Vegas I was talking to the other day, and they thought, well, it's dramatically going to impact their market. And I don't know if that's necessarily true. I do really foresee that you will have prices going up here in the short term, because I think a lot of people are going to be cashing out and they're probably not going to rebuild, right? So, I was at dinner the other night and someone anecdotally said like, well, I should have bought 10 houses before this happened. Well, again, if you have 10,000 homes on the market and then 1,000 go off the market because people want to take it off the market, maybe again, loan it to friends and family, think about how that's going to affect the market. And, is it possible, like some people have talked about, the prices just jump exponentially? Yeah, that could happen. And there's another scenario where I really do think it's going to play out. And that is a lot of these homeowners are elderly, even in the Pacific Palisades, right? That you have people that have been living there for 30, 40, 50 years, and a lot of them are on fixed income right now. And they're not going to rebuild, right? Due to the timeline, they're most likely just going to move in with family and relocate somewhere. So, where does that leave the destroyed homes? Because some of these homes won't be built to economic reasons, for governmental reasons, right? Governmental policy. And I think it's going to take a long time to really play it out. I think that's being optimistic. All this is going to be resolved in 2 to 3 years. I think it's going to be probably closer to 7 to 10 years right there. So I've had a lot of people come to me thinking that home prices are going to double in 1 year. And I just don't see that happen. I just don't think that our market just really has that type of growth, especially with interest rates at 7% right now. Not everybody is going to be able to afford that type of house, right? And a lot of people, had their wealth in the equity of the house, and that's gone outside of the insurance payment. So I don't think this is really realistic to think that home prices are just going to go skyrocketing above and beyond. I just don't really see it happening right now. I do see some growth as a result of this because inventory is going to shrink, and you're going to have more buyers here in the actual buying pool. But I don't think that's going to happen where it's just going to be a massive 2020, 2021, where you're going to see 30% a year growth. It's not going to happen. Again, you're going to see growth more than probably the 4% that was estimated here in LA County, but I don't see that type of growth taking place. And so I think, going back to governmental policy, right? One thing that I haven't heard anybody talk about so far, and this really pertains mostly to the Palisades fire. And especially because you had a lot of damage there in the Pacific Palisades and Malibu. And you have to wonder, right? Because everyone's talking about everything being fast tracked and whatnot. And a lot of the things that they're going to start being lax on, a lot of them is at the state level, not at the city and local level. And especially when it comes to getting permits, I, for one, just have a hard time believing that people are going to be able to get their plans approved right away. And to take it another level, right, that you remember, people are going to have to find architects, you're going to have to find contractors. You just don't have enough here in Southern California. So it's definitely conceivable where you are going to have contractors from other states, other areas, other parts of the state coming down here to help to kind of meet the demand when it actually gets to that. But to have the architect to draw up the plans, to submit everything, the cost of doing that, I think that's going to be a hindrance to a lot of people. And take away the insurance portion about that. We'll get to that in a minute, right? So I think there's a lot of people that may not want to rebuild, right? It's just going to be too much for them. And so I do think that the government issues are going to be, take, for example, the California Coastal Commission, right? I really see a world for all these damaged homes, especially on the ocean side, right, of PCH, where they will eventually have that all cleaned up and they will not allow people to rebuild houses, right? They will kind of essentially take it back, make it a park, whatever you want to call it. I could see that it's a dream come true for them, that because they have so much strict regulations, that I really do honestly see where they're going to make it really difficult for everybody. I just, in my heart of hearts, I just don't see how all of a sudden they are going to change and be able to help everybody. They should, but I just don't see it. Maybe I'm wrong. And that also goes for Pacific Palisades, right? Because, you lost so much infrastructure there, but there are a lot of, homes there that probably wouldn't be approved by the Department of Building and Safety for a multitude of reasons. Like they probably wouldn't allow the foundations to be built, homes built on hillsides. So a lot of those homes, you're not going to be able to rebuild also. And so I think, in addition to being able to get all your plans together and put it all together, remember that you have to worry about the infrastructure, right? So this isn't a situation where, hey, maybe we lost 10, 15 houses, 30 houses, but the neighborhood's still intact. No, you lost everything. Again, the infrastructure has been wiped out, right? So you're going to have to, the city's going to have to redo plumbing, fiber optics, electrical, schools, everything. Everything is going to have to be redone. They're not going to be ready to issue permits, right? And to really be able to go through plans until they have their infrastructure in place. And how long do you think that? I mean, that easily is going to take more than a year, I would think. Again, I'm not a professional urban planner. I didn't go to school for that, but these things take time, and there's still a bureaucracy. There's still going to be a lot of red tape, and I just have a hard time seeing them being able to do this in a timely manner. So think about that even if you do want to rebuild, they're going to have the infrastructure plans in place. So let me give you an example. I heard a guy, local news here in Southern California. This one was in the Palisades fire. And he was talking about that, fortunately, his home was not burned. Well, it had some smoke damage, but it was saved, right? But it's the only one on the block. And so do you want to live there, right? Because if you live there and, eventually they're going to start coming in and, scrubbing all of these homes and taking all the chemicals, the toxins, everything that goes, and basically getting it ready just to the foundation to have somebody rebuild it. You're talking thousands of homes like that. And, just like when you buy new construction, it's very similar that, especially if you're in the first phase, it could be 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years, where you're going to have to be around dust, debris, nails on the road, right? It just comes with the territory with new construction. And, what are you going to be, living in a house that doesn't have any infrastructure, right? So this guy, his house was saved, right? And he said that one of the reasons he moved into the neighborhood was for his kid's school, which was right down the block. But guess what? His kid's school burned down. So now they're looking for a school in another area. So we don't even know what the time frame is going to be for them to be able to build that school, if they build it again. And so by the time they figure that out, his kids might be done with elementary school, right? So, that's something that he's and his family are gonna have to consider whether or not it makes sense for them to rebuild. And so I think, if you're in that situation, right, that if your home was still standing, again, are you going to want to live there if your neighbors' homes all got destroyed? You have no utilities. You have no idea what will even get done. And, are you just going to be willing to wait around to watch all that debris to be removed? And are you going to want to live in that for a long time? Right? So these are all things that someone's going to have to actually think about. Right? So those are things. Right? So let's talk a little bit about insurance. So a lot of people were covered when it comes to fire insurance under the California Fair Plan. And the California Fair Plan has limitations on coverage, and it's up to $3 million. So in the Palisades fire, right, you had a lot of homes that are obviously worth more than $3 million, but you could have a $10 million house, a $15 million house. But if you had the California Fair Plan, unless you had supplemental insurance, the most you're going to be reimbursed for is $3 million, right? But let's assume, right, that to say maybe you're in the Eden fire, and maybe the cost originally before the fires was going to be $1.5 million on your insurance plan. So there's a couple things. I'm hearing people talking about and getting advice that they should get a public adjuster. So here's something to keep in mind, right? Because this process is going to take a while. And think about it, like I've had clients that have had water, they've had fire damage, all sorts of things, right? And it's very often that, they don't even get money for 8 to 12 months. And what do you think it's going to be like here when you have thousands of homes? Even if they try to fast track everything, again, what we talked about, when you don't have the infrastructure around you, it's going to be complicated to get those payments right away. So knowing that, right, that especially something like, the fire, like the Eden fire, right? And if you, again, the example I use, like, okay, let's just say maybe you have coverage for $1.5 million, okay? And you go to a public adjuster, right? Well, they're going to take 10 to 15% of every dollar. So if they're going to be taking 10 to 15% of every dollar, let's just give the 10% example, right? And you get a 1.5 settlement from your insurance company. Well, guess what? Now your public adjuster is actually going to get 10% of that. Now you're going to be short 150,000, right, on your building costs. So I think it's really important to really talk to your insurance agent and your insurance company and get some other opinions before you actually go the public adjuster route. Unless you just want the money and that's that, you need a quick money, maybe. But even then, like everything else, you really need to get a second and third opinion on everything. So if you get this, let's say $1.5 million, settlement, like we talked about before, it's still, if you wanted to rebuild, the cost of being able to rebuild with the lack of supplies, whether it be concrete, steel, lumber, it's all going to be very expensive right now too, right? And I have a sinking feeling that if you're going to be bringing in people from out of state that are contractors, meaning that you're going to be doing people that don't have a state license, I could easily see this being played out. And so I think you're going to be in a world where whatever coverage you have, whatever it costs to build, it's easily going to be 20 to 30, 40% higher than what your insurance is going to pay out. And so that brings me back to what you were looking at before, is how many people are going to rebuild. And I do think you're going to have a lot of people taking that insurance money and trying to be able to find something here locally. I think those who are elderly are probably just going to move into with family. That probably makes more sense. Something here locally, if they have some, or moving out of the area. But I think people are going to have to be looking at too, it depends on what your job is. If you own a chain of restaurants all in the affected area, you know what? Maybe you decide it's not worth starting over again. But if you have a big conglomerate that you work with, okay, well, hey, you know what? Maybe I want to stay here, right? Or maybe I can ask my employer to relocate me to somewhere else. These are all things, right, that are kind of this unfolding story, which I really think that it's really going to take at least 7 to 10 years to fully play out. And these are just some of the things, right, that I can think of off the top of my head. So let me know what questions you have. We're going to be meeting with one of our insurance agents really soon. So love to hear what questions you might have for them. Definitely feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Let me know what you thought of everything that I talked about today. And I'm Scott Himelstein with the Scott Himelstein Group. We'll see you on the next video.